I found my wife's secret affair with our neighbor, and now she's claiming I owe her $250, $0 in marital debts for the house, while secretly planning to sell everything. How do I prove she's been cheating and fight for my half before she destroys us? I never thought I'd find myself in a situation like this, but here I am, trying to piece together how everything fell apart so fast. It all started with a few oddities, little things at first. My wife, Lisa, had always been a bit high maintenance, but lately, she'd been unusually secretive about her phone and her whereabouts. She'd leave her phone on the nightstand, face down, and when I'd ask about plans or errands, she'd give me these vague, dismissive answers. I figured she was just stressed or maybe had some work stuff she didn't want to share. But then I noticed changes in her behavior, more late nights, more sneaking around, and the way she'd suddenly get defensive when I'd bring up anything about our relationship or the house finances. One night, I came home early from work because I wasn't feeling well. I decided to surprise her with dinner. As I was walking into the house, I saw her car parked in the driveway, but the curtains in the living room were slightly open, something I'd never seen before. Curious, I peeked inside and saw her and our neighbor Mike sitting close on the couch. They looked way too comfortable and I could hear the muffled sounds of their laughter. My stomach dropped. I froze there for a second, trying to process what I was seeing. It wasn't just a friendly chat. They were definitely more than friends. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, so I quietly backed out and waited until the next day to gather more evidence. That night, I started checking her phone, her social media, and her texts. I found a string of messages between her and Mike that confirmed what I saw: secret plans to meet up, flirtatious messages, even talk about keeping it hidden from her husband. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. How long had this been going on? How could she lie to my face for so long? The next morning, I confronted her. I told her I knew about her and Mike. Her face twisted into this nasty sneer, and she started lying. Right then and there, saying I was paranoid, that I was reading too much into things, that she was just talking to him about the lawn or some stupid excuse. She even called me insecure and accused me of spying on her, which made me furious. I told her I'd seen enough and I wanted the truth. That's when she dropped her bombshell. She claimed I owed her $250, $0 in marital debts, because of the house, the car, and all the money we'd supposedly invested together. She said she was planning to sell everything and split the profits before I even knew what hit me. I was stunned. How could she be so cold? How could she be planning to take everything, including the house where we raised our kids? I felt betrayed on every level, by her lies, and by her apparent willingness to destroy us all for some affair and a pile of cash. I knew I had to do something, but I had no idea what. I was angry, hurt, and confused all at once. The betrayal was one thing, but the fact that she was already scheming to cut me out of our shared life made it even worse. I had to figure out how to fight back, how to prove her cheating, and how to stop her from selling everything behind my back. I started thinking about legal options, about the evidence I could gather, and how to protect what was mine. But honestly, I was overwhelmed. I'd never been in a situation like this before, and the emotional blow was staggering. I kept asking myself how I didn't see the signs earlier, how I'd been so blind to her betrayal. The worst part was knowing that, even if I caught her in this lie, she'd deny everything, spin it around, and try to make me look like the bad guy. But I knew the truth, and I was about to do whatever it took to get it out in the open and fight for what was rightfully mine. After that confrontation, everything felt like it was spiraling out of control. I couldn't sleep, couldn't focus at work. All I kept thinking about was how she had lied, how she was planning to sell the house, and how she played me for months while she was sneaking around with Mike. I knew I had to act fast. If she was already planning to sell everything, I needed to gather proof, something solid that I could use if it came down to legal battles or even just saving what was left of my life. First thing I did was go through our financial records. I pulled out every bank statement, every credit card bill, and every document related to the house. I wanted to see if I could find any suspicious transactions, anything that indicated she was hiding money or planning to make a quick sale. That's when I noticed some strange activity in the last few months. Large withdrawals from our joint account that I hadn't authorized, transfers to accounts in her name that I'd never seen before. It was clear she'd been planning something behind my back. I also decided to check the house's legal paperwork. I needed to understand what her rights were, what her plans might be, and how I could protect myself. I found out that she'd been secretly paying off a loan on her own, and she'd been trying to put the house in her name entirely. That was a huge red flag. If she succeeded, I'd be left with nothing, no house, no shared assets, nothing. I knew I had to act fast to stop her from selling or transferring anything. That's when I reached out to a lawyer. I explained everything, her affair, the supposed marital debts, her plans to sell everything. The lawyer told me I had a lot of leverage if I could prove her infidelity and her plans to defraud me. She suggested I gather evidence of her affair, screenshots of messages, photos if I had any, and anything else that could prove she was cheating. I also needed to document her financial moves. I started secretly recording her conversations whenever I could, and I kept copies of her texts and emails. I knew she'd deny everything, but I had to have proof. Meanwhile, Lisa kept playing the victim, throwing accusations at me. She said I was paranoid, that I was controlling, that I was just jealous because she was so much better than me. She even said I owed her money because of the house, claiming that I'd been living off her and that I was some kind of deadbeat. I couldn't believe her audacity. She was the one sneaking around, planning to sell everything, and now she was trying to turn it around on me. It was infuriating. One night I caught her talking on the phone with Mike again. She was whispering, trying to hide it. I managed to record part of their conversation. She was telling him about how she'd make sure I never got my hands on the house, how she'd find a way to keep everything, even if it meant lying or manipulating. That was it. I knew I had enough to start building my case. I couldn't let her get away with this. I also started talking to a few friends who'd been through similar situations. They told me to stay calm, stay legal, and don't give her any reason to accuse me of anything. I kept thinking about the fact that she was planning to sell everything behind my back, and I realized I had to be the one to stop her. I couldn't let her take everything we built, especially not after all the years I'd put into this marriage. The emotional toll was enormous. I found myself oscillating between anger, sadness, and a strange sense of numbness. I kept asking myself how I'd missed so many signs, how I'd been so blind to her lies. It felt like I'd been living in a nightmare, but I also knew I had to be strategic. I couldn't just confront her again and expect her to tell the truth. I had to have my ducks in a row. I had to outsmart her, because I knew she was planning something big and I needed to be ready to fight for what was mine. So I kept gathering evidence, kept talking to the lawyer, and kept trying to stay one step ahead. Every day felt like walking on a tightrope. I was terrified she'd do something reckless, like try to transfer the house into her name overnight or sell it without my knowledge. I knew I had to act fast, but I also felt helpless, knowing she was more cunning than I'd thought. This was no longer just about infidelity, it was about survival, and I was determined not to let her destroy everything I'd worked for. Things escalated faster than I expected. The more I dug into her financials and the evidence I collected, the clearer it became that Lisa was dead set on taking everything she could. I found out she'd already been talking with a real estate agent behind my back, trying to get an idea of how much the house was worth and how fast she could sell it. When I confronted her about it, she shrugged it off, calling me paranoid again, saying I was imagining things, that she was just exploring options because I was so controlling. Yeah, right. That's when I decided I needed to be more aggressive. I hired a private investigator. I didn't want to just rely on my own evidence. I needed someone who could follow her, get photos, and confirm her plans. The PI was able to confirm what I already suspected. She was meeting with the real estate agent, discussing a sale, and even looking at houses nearby. I couldn't believe how far she was willing to go. It was like she was already preparing her escape route, leaving me with nothing. Meanwhile, she kept up the act of being the perfect wife, at least in front of her friends and family. She'd throw tantrums if I questioned her, call me insecure, accuse me of not trusting her. But the truth was, I trusted her about as much as I trusted a snake. Every time she left the house, I followed her from a distance just to make sure she wasn't meeting Mike or anyone else. It was exhausting, but I had to stay vigilant. One afternoon, I caught her sneaking into a bank branch. When I looked over her shoulder, I saw her withdrawing a huge sum of cash, $50. I immediately called my lawyer. That money had to be tied to her plans. I also found out she'd been opening new accounts in her name, trying to hide her assets. I realized she was trying to cut me out completely. I couldn't let that happen. That night, I sat her down in the kitchen, tried to keep my voice steady, and told her I knew everything. I told her I had proof of her affair, her plans to sell the house, and her attempts to hide money. She looked stunned for a moment. Then her face twisted into that nasty sneer again. She denied everything, called me a crazy, jealous husband, and said I was just trying to ruin her life. She insisted that I owed her money, that she was entitled to everything because she worked so hard. And I was just lazy. That's when she threw out her claim that I owed her $250, $0 in marital debts, claiming she'd done all the renovations, paid all the bills, and that I was just a deadbeat. I couldn't believe her audacity. She was trying to manipulate me into thinking I was the one in the wrong, all the while plotting to take everything I had. I told her I wasn't going to let her do that I had enough evidence to prove her cheating and her plans to defraud me. I also told her I was going to get a restraining order if she kept trying to sell the house without my consent. Her eyes narrowed and she started crying, calling me cruel, saying I was ruining her life. But I knew I had to stay strong. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore. It was about saving what was left of my future. Over the next few days, I worked with my lawyer to file paperwork to freeze the house's title. I also started gathering affidavits from friends and neighbors who'd seen her sneaking around with Mike. I felt like I was building a fortress around what was mine, brick by brick. But I also knew Lisa wouldn't go down without a fight. She was already talking about getting what she deserved, and I could see the anger simmering beneath her fake tears. It hurt so much to realize how far she'd gone, how she'd betrayed everything we'd built. I kept asking myself how I missed all the signs, how I'd been so blind to her lies. Every day was a new battle, trying to keep my sanity, protect my assets, and figure out what her next move would be. I wasn't sure how it would all end, but I knew I had to keep fighting. If I didn't, I'd lose everything, including my dignity. I'd never thought I'd be in this situation, but now I was in full-on war mode, and I wasn't about to let her win without a fight. The tension between us reached a boiling point, and I knew I had to act fast before she pulled off something irreversible. I spent nights poring over every document, every detail I'd uncovered, trying to piece together her next move. I was certain she was planning to push ahead with the sale of the house, and I had to stop her. I also knew her claim about the marital debts was just a manipulative tactic. She wanted to guilt me into giving her more, maybe even settle for a fraction of what I owed her, just to get her way. I decided to confront her again, but this time I was prepared. I sat her down in the living room, my lawyer's documents on the table, the evidence of her financial moves, the recordings of her conversations. I told her I knew everything about her affair, her plans, her attempts to hide assets, and her scheme to sell the house. Her face twisted with rage and panic. She looked like she was about to explode. Her response? Denial, of course. She called me paranoid, said I was making this all up, that I was just trying to control her. She threw out more lies, claimed the affair was just a mistake, that she loved me and only did it because I'd been neglectful, that she was entitled to the house because she worked hard. Then, she said something that chilled me to the bone. You owe me $250, $0, and I'll take everything if you try to stop me. That was the moment I realized I had to act decisively. I told her she wasn't going to get away with this, that I was filing for legal protection, and that I would fight her for my rights. I contacted a lawyer immediately and explained the situation. We drafted paperwork to freeze her assets, including the house, and to prevent her from selling or transferring anything. I also filed documents to formally contest her claim of marital debts, which I knew was just her way of extorting me. Meanwhile, I hired a forensic accountant to scrutinize our joint finances, to uncover any hidden accounts or suspicious transactions. What I found was staggering: multiple bank accounts in her name, large sums transferred out, and even some offshore accounts she'd opened without my knowledge. It was obvious she'd been planning to disappear with the money and the house. I felt a mix of anger and helplessness. How could she be so ruthless? How could she betray me and our family like this? I also made sure to document everything, every interaction, every lie, every suspicious activity. I kept a detailed timeline, knowing that if this went to court, I'd need irrefutable evidence. I even hired a private investigator to follow her during her supposed errands, just to verify her movements. The more I uncovered, the more I realized how deep her plans went. The emotional toll was brutal. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and furious. I kept questioning how I missed the signs, how I'd been so blind to her true nature. I was hurting, but I knew I couldn't let her see that. I had to be strong for myself, for whatever was left of my dignity, and for my kids. I also knew I had to prepare for the worst. She might try to fight me in court or even try to leave the country with the money. I couldn't let that happen. Her behavior grew more erratic. She accused me of trying to ruin her, called me a control freak, and even tried to turn the kids against me. But I stayed focused on the facts. I knew I had to keep my head clear and let the legal process do its work. I also reached out to some close friends for support. They'd been through similar betrayals and told me to keep my composure and not let her manipulate me. Every day felt like a battle. I was fighting not just her, but also my own feelings of heartbreak and betrayal. I couldn't believe how someone I loved and trusted could become this cold, calculating person. But I also realized I'd been given a second chance, an opportunity to stand up, protect what's mine, and finally see her true colors. I was determined to fight for my rights, for my dignity, and to make sure she didn't destroy everything we'd built together. I knew this wasn't over yet, but I was ready for whatever came next. The legal battle was now in full swing, and I could feel the pressure mounting every day. Lisa was doing everything she could to stall, deny, and manipulate her way out of it. She'd show up at the house, pretend to be the innocent wife, crying and begging, trying to make me feel guilty for ruining her life. She claimed I was trying to steal her happiness and that I had no right to interfere with her plans. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, she was quietly working with her lawyer to find loopholes, to push the sale of the house through before I could get a court order to stop it. I stayed vigilant. I kept gathering evidence, even more so now that she was actively trying to cover her tracks. I had the recordings, the bank statements, the affidavits from neighbors who'd seen her sneaking around with Mike. I also found out she'd been secretly talking to a lawyer friend of hers, trying to get advice on how to hide assets further or even move out of the country. That was the last straw. I knew she was desperate and I had to act fast. One day, I received a call from my lawyer. She'd filed a motion to freeze the house's sale and to declare her claims of marital debt invalid. The judge set a hearing date. I felt a little relief, but also dread. I knew Lisa would pull out all the stops to win, and I had to be prepared for a fight. I also started talking to a financial investigator to see if I could find any hidden accounts or assets she tried to hide. What I uncovered was shocking. She transferred money into offshore accounts, possibly planning to leave the country with everything. At this point, I was emotionally drained. This wasn't just about money. It was about betrayal, trust, and the life I thought I knew. I felt like I was fighting a war on multiple fronts. I'd wake up every morning with a sense of dread, wondering what new scheme she was cooking up. I couldn't sleep much, and when I did, nightmares haunted me, dreams of losing everything, of her walking away with the house, with the kids, with my life. I also started talking to some close friends and a counselor. I needed someone to vent to, someone who understood what I was going through. They told me to stay strong, to keep my focus on the evidence, and to prepare for the worst. But honestly, some days it felt like I was just barely hanging on. Watching her manipulate her way through legal loopholes, trying to make me look like the bad guy, was infuriating. Every time I thought I had a handle on things, she'd surprise me with some new stunt, like trying to claim I owed her money for some marital debts she invented, knowing I had proof that I didn't. One night I found her packing a bag. When I confronted her, she looked me dead in the eyes and said she was leaving, that she was done with this nonsense, and that she'd take the kids and leave if I kept fighting her. I felt my blood boil. I told her she wasn't going anywhere, that I was going to do everything in my power to stop her. I called the police to get a report of her actions, just in case she tried to take the kids without my consent. I was terrified she'd try to run, but I knew I couldn't let her get away with it. Throughout all this, I kept questioning myself. How did I get here? How did my life turn into this nightmare? I loved her once, but now I saw her for what she really was: manipulative, selfish, and dangerous. Yet part of me still hoped for some kind of resolution, some way to save what was left of our marriage, even if it meant going through hell to do it. But deep down, I knew I had to prepare for the worst. This wasn't just about winning a legal battle. It was about reclaiming my life, my dignity, and my future. I could let her destroy everything without a fight. I was ready to see this through, to fight for my rights, for my children, and for the truth. The court date finally arrived, and I knew this was the moment everything would either fall into place or blow up in my face. I felt a mix of exhaustion and determination. I had spent weeks, maybe months, building my case, collecting every piece of evidence I could find: recordings, bank statements, affidavits, everything. I knew Lisa would pull out all her tricks, but I was ready. I had the truth, and I was determined to fight for what was rightfully mine. The hearing was tense. Lisa sat across from me, her face cold and defiant. Her lawyer tried every tactic to undermine my evidence, claim I was paranoid, or accuse me of trying to ruin her life. But I had everything backed up. She had no real ground to stand on. My lawyer presented the proof of her affair, her financial manipulations, and her plans to sell the house without my consent. The judge listened carefully, and I felt a flicker of hope as the evidence was laid out. In the end, the judge ruled in my favor. She issued an order to freeze the sale of the house and declared that Lisa's claim of marital debts was invalid. She also ordered Lisa to turn over all financial documents, including those offshore accounts, and to cease any transfer of assets until further notice. The court recognized that Lisa had been planning to defraud me, and that her affair was a key part of her motive to destroy our marriage and steal everything. The aftermath was a whirlwind. Lisa was furious, screaming and crying in the courtroom, but the judge was clear. She couldn't do anything until the next hearing. I felt a huge wave of relief, knowing I'd stopped her from walking away with my house and my future. I also filed for divorce, knowing that my marriage had become irreparably broken. It hurt to say goodbye to what we once had, but I knew I had no choice. In the weeks that followed, I worked on rebuilding my life. I moved out of the house, started therapy, and focused on my kids. The pain of betrayal didn't disappear overnight, but I learned to accept it and start healing. I also learned a lot about myself, about resilience, about not trusting blindly, and about the importance of standing up for what's right. Lisa's plans to sell everything fell apart, and she faced legal consequences for her actions. She's still fighting to get some of her money back, but I've taken control of what's left. Looking back, I realize how much I've grown from this ordeal. I never thought I'd be in a situation where I'd have to fight for my marriage, my assets, and my dignity all at once. But I did it. I fought not just for the house or the money, but for myself, the man I want to be, the man I still am beneath all this chaos. If there's one thing I want others to take away from this, it's this: never ignore the signs of betrayal or manipulation. Trust your instincts, gather your evidence, and don't be afraid to fight for what's yours. Because in the end, the truth will come out and justice might just be on your side.